Most men in their 40s won't admit they feel lost. They'll just keep showing up on time, on task, on autopilot. They'll keep chasing promotions that don't excite them, keep making jokes that cover the silence, keep nodding through conversations that never reach the heart. But deep down, many of them aren't chasing success anymore. They're chasing a memory. Not a single moment, but a feeling, the feeling of being fully alive before the world demanded performance, before life became a series of responsibilities stacked higher than dreams, and sometimes that feeling comes rushing back from the last place you'd expect, a cardboard box in the attic. Dusty, forgotten, half-labelled. Inside, an old toy, a concert stub, a note in faded ink from someone who meant everything once. You lift it and suddenly you're there again. That night, that summer, that version of you who believed anything was possible. And for one brief moment something opens. Not because you want to be a kid again, but because you remember who you were before you stopped asking what lit you up. You didn't call it nostalgia back then, you just called it life. Back when music wasn't background noise, it was a lifeline. Back when friendships weren't text threads, they were hours on the phone, hands on your shoulders, laughter that left you breathless. Back when joy wasn't another item on a checklist. You didn't know it then, but those memories were carving something deep inside you, a sense of place, of rhythm, of self. But then the world got louder. And somewhere between the bills and the deadlines and the expectations you never agreed to, that part of you faded into the static. That's not a crisis. That's a signal. It's your past knocking, not to pull you back, but to remind you that the parts of you that felt real still are. Sometimes the answer isn't out there in the next achievement or the next reinvention. Sometimes it's already inside you, covered in dust, waiting for you to remember. So before you scroll past another day, ask yourself, when was the last time you stopped performing and started remembering? Because sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do isn't to push forward, it's to circle back. They say real men don't look back, but the data disagrees. Modern psychology tells a different story, one backed by decades of research and thousands of lives quietly transformed. Nostalgia isn't weakness, it's strength. It's not indulgence, it's medicine. Dr. Clay Routledge calls it an existential resource, a tool that helps us remember we've lived meaningfully, that we've mattered, that even when we feel adrift, there's proof in our past that we once felt whole and can again. Nostalgia does more than stir emotion, it stabilizes identity. When you hear a song from your teenage years, you're not just remembering, it's like your body recognizes a version of you it forgot it missed. You feel time fold, not in sadness, but in recognition, in relief. That boy is still in there, and the fact that you can remember how it felt to be him, that's power. Psychologists have found that when people intentionally reflect on their past, on specific emotionally rich moments, they experience a measurable spike in optimism, connection, and even physical energy. One study showed that after being guided through a nostalgic memory, participants exercised more. Not because of guilt, because remembering who they were reminded them of who they still want to be. And it goes deeper. Nostalgia has been linked to reduced physical pain, improved resilience in the face of loss, and even increased generosity and empathy. It doesn't pull you backward, it fills your tank, it makes the next mile possible. But here's the trap. Most men confuse remembering with weakness. They've been told to power through, to keep their heads down, to forget what used to matter because that was then. But the brain doesn't work that way. You can't amputate memory without losing strength. You can't forget who you were and expect to know who you are. The man who used to sit in his bedroom, headphones on, eyes closed, feeling something so deeply it hurt, that man had access to something most people lose as they grow older: full presence, emotional honesty, wonder, and no, you can't recreate the past, but you can reclaim what it gave you. Because the songs still play, the objects still hold charge, the memories still echo with meaning, and every time you go back, deliberately, fully, you bring something forward. So don't dismiss that ache you feel when a certain smell hits you, or when you find an old photo that makes your throat catch. That's not weakness, that's memory doing its job. It's not trying to trap you, it's trying to fuel you. He didn't cry when the marriage ended, not when the papers were signed, not even when he walked through an empty house that once held voices and laughter and Sunday morning pancakes. He didn't cry then. But he did cry when he found a toy car buried in a box at the back of the garage. Tiny, faded, one wheel missing. But his son's initials were still scratched into the underside with a shaky hand and a pen that barely worked. And there, on that cold concrete floor surrounded by forgotten things, the weight of everything he'd been holding back collapsed. Not because he wanted to be young again, but because he suddenly remembered what it felt like to be needed, to matter, to be a part of something that wasn't just measured in metrics or money, but in presence. That moment didn't come from therapy or podcasts or performance reviews. It came from memory, raw, unscripted, unfiltered memory. And that kind of memory has direction. Because memory lane isn't just a detour, it's a map. When you feel lost, it doesn't always mean you've taken a wrong turn. Sometimes it means the old compass broke. The one you stopped using when the world convinced you success was linear, logical, quantifiable. But the map you need doesn't follow those rules. It's built from the moments you forgot were building anything at all. That summer, you spent recording songs off the radio, waiting for the DJ to shut up so you could get a clean intro. The Saturday mornings in front of the TV, cereal in hand, watching cartoons you still remember more vividly than last week's emails. The hours spent with your best friend doing nothing and somehow everything. None of it looked important at the time, but it was laying bricks, marking trails, sketching blueprints. Psychologists call it self-continuity, the idea that your identity doesn't reset at each chapter of life, but threads through them all. That who you were is still informing who you are, and more importantly, who you're becoming. And when you engage that thread, when you pull on it, you don't collapse into the past. You reconnect with the clarity that came before the clutter. It's like hearing your own voice beneath the noise again. You remember that you used to value creativity over productivity, connection over reputation, wonder over efficiency. You remember that the version of you who used to lie on the grass and name shapes in clouds wasn't wasting time. He was learning to imagine, to slow down, to exist without explanation. And now that you're overwhelmed and under-inspired and always on, that version of you might just be the one who knows what to do next. So go back deliberately, not to escape, but to equip, because those old memories aren't shackles, they're tools, and the man you are now has permission to pick them up and use them. In December of 1914, in a frozen trench somewhere in Europe, young men did something impossible. They stopped fighting. British and German soldiers, many of them barely older than boys, sat in the dirt, weapons idle, as one side began to sing a Christmas carol, then the other. And for a moment the war went quiet. They didn't speak the same language, they didn't share the same uniforms, but they shared something else, the sound of a childhood song, the memory of warmth, the ache of home. They left the trenches, they met in the middle, they shared chocolate and cigarettes and photographs of their families. They played a game of soccer in no man's land. For one night, the war paused, not because of politics, but because of nostalgia, because memory was stronger than orders. That's the power of remembrance. It can cross barriers that logic can't. It can heal rifts that force can't touch. It can remind a man of who he was before the world told him who to become. And that power isn't reserved for history books. It lives in you. Sometimes it's in a smell, or a sound, or a phrase you haven't heard in 20 years that suddenly cracks your chest open, like you never left the room where it first mattered. Sometimes it comes in the form of a story. Truman Capote once wrote about a boy named Buddy and his older cousin Suk. Every winter they made fruit cakes together for people they barely knew. Not for profit, not for praise, just because it was tradition. Just because it meant something to them. They didn't have much, but they had that, a ritual, a memory in the making. Years later, Suk was gone. The boy had grown. But every time fruitcake season came around, he remembered. He felt her presence. He felt himself again. That's the secret of memory. It doesn't just bring back the past, it brings you back to yourself. Not just the highlight reel, the full you. The unedited version. The one who loved deeply, laughed freely, grieved honestly, dreamed without apology. And in a world that rewards detachment, nostalgia becomes an act of courage. To remember is to resist forgetting who you are. So don't ignore that feeling when it rises. Don't push it away. It's not just a memory, it's a mirror, and it's asking you to look. You grew up before the world started rushing, before phones became extensions of the body, before everything was optimized and tracked and shared. You remember when silence wasn't awkward, it was natural. When getting lost was part of the journey, not a crisis. When wonder didn't need an internet connection. And that gave you something the world's forgotten how to teach. You learned how to sit with yourself, how to make something from nothing, how to pay attention, not because someone told you to, but because life was unfolding in real time and you didn't want to miss it. You lived through the analog age where joy wasn't delivered, it was discovered. Mixtapes, passed notes, handshakes that meant something, late-night conversations that didn't need emojis because the silence between words already said enough. You didn't scroll to feel something, you lived it fully. Now, in the age of instant access and curated moments, it's easy to forget that you still carry those tools inside you. But they didn't vanish. They just went quiet under the noise. The ability to wait, to listen, to feel the weight of a moment without needing to capture it, that's your inheritance, and it's time to bring it back into your life, not as nostalgia, but as wisdom. Psychologists call it anticipatory nostalgia. The act of creating moments now that your future self will one day look back on and treasure. It's not about recapturing youth. It's about living with the same intentionality that made your youth unforgettable. It means lighting a fire in the backyard and watching the stars without checking the time. It means making a playlist not for likes but for your soul. It means telling your kid about the time you rode your bike so far you got lost and how that was the best afternoon of your entire summer. It means choosing to care, to show up, to make memories you'll actually want to revisit. The world will keep trying to convince you that presence is a luxury, that slowing down is failure, that sentiment is weakness. But you know better. You've known better since you first sat in your childhood room. Headphones on, heart wide open, dreaming about a future that wasn't perfect but was yours. And maybe that future got noisy. Maybe it got complicated. Maybe it pulled you in directions you didn't choose. But the man who lived through all that, he's still here. And he remembers. He remembers how it felt to be deeply moved by a song, to trust a friend without agenda, to look forward to something as simple as a Saturday morning. He remembers because those moments mattered, and they still do. So instead of racing towards some future version of happiness that always seems just out of reach, maybe it's time to pause, to breathe, to return, not to your past, but to your core. Because what Gen X still knows by heart isn't just nostalgia, it's presence, it's meaning, it's real, and the world needs it now more than ever. There's a moment every man hits. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or breakdowns. It shows up quietly, somewhere between the second cup of coffee and the silence of a late night, and it asks a question you didn't expect. Is this all there is? It doesn't mean your life is broken. It means your soul is whispering. Because somewhere along the way, the things that once lit you up became background noise. The dreams you carried turned into duties. The spark became a flicker, and yet beneath all of that is a truth you haven't lost, only misplaced. The way forward isn't always about reinvention. Sometimes it's about remembering, not just where you've been, but who you were when you got there. Not just what you accomplished, but what made you feel alive while doing it. Not just the path you chose, but the one you left behind that still calls to you in quiet moments. This isn't about longing for the past, it's about listening to what the past still wants to give you. Because the boy who stayed up late building cities out of Legos, he knew how to dream. The teenager who stood under the stars and felt something stir in his chest, he knew how to feel. The young man who told someone, "I love you," and meant it with every part of himself, he knew how to be brave. And that kind of knowing doesn't disappear, it just needs permission to speak again. So here's where you begin, not with a grand gesture, not with a total overhaul, with something small, something true. Take 5 minutes tonight, when the world is quiet, when no one needs anything from you. Open that old box you've avoided or that drawer you've forgotten. Hold the thing that made you feel something once. Don't analyze it, don't explain it, just let it speak. Let it remind you, let it reconnect the man you've become with the boy who once believed anything was possible. And if it moves you, if it cracks something open, don't keep it to yourself. In the comments, share one memory, one object, one song, one story that still lives inside you. You never know who you'll reach. You never know whose memory you'll unlock. Because this isn't just about healing alone. It's about remembering together. And maybe, just maybe, that's where happiness has been hiding all along. Not ahead of you, but waiting behind you, quietly for you to turn around and bring it home.